The blood-soaked envelope slipped from Willa Bennett's trembling fingers, and she realized with absolute horror that she'd just broken into the private chambers of a dead vampire king. The wax seal bearing the royal crest of House Drakonir lay shattered on the obsidian floor, crimson fragments scattered like rubies across the polished stone. Willa's breath came in short gasps as she stared at the parchment in her hands, her brown eyes scanning words that made no logical sense. The document, written in elegant script that seemed to shimmer with residual magic, declared that Constantine Drakonir, vampire king of the Eastern Territories, had bequeathed his entire estate, fortune, and dominion to one Willa Marie Bennett, a 23-year-old human woman who worked as an archivist in the Nighthaven Public Library. She'd only come to the royal mansion to catalog a collection of medieval texts that the late king's estate had donated. The housekeeper, a stern vampire woman named Isadora, had shown her to the library wing before vanishing to attend to other matters. But Willa had gotten lost in the labyrinthine corridors, and when she'd pushed open what she thought was a bathroom door, she'd found herself in a study that felt frozen in time. The desk had been covered in papers, and among them, the sealed will had practically glowed with importance. Now she stood in the dead king's private sanctuary, having committed what was probably a capital offense in vampire law, holding proof that she was either the luckiest woman alive or the target of an elaborate, deadly joke. "I suggest you explain yourself before I remove your head from your shoulders." The voice came from behind her, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as intoxicating. Willa spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. The will clutched against her chest like a shield. In the doorway stood a vampire who looked carved from moonlight and winter frost. His hair fell past his shoulders in waves of pure white. His skin possessed that distinctive alabaster pallor that marked him as one of the old ones, and his eyes burned with an inner fire that shifted between silver and crimson. He wore modern clothes, black trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, but he moved with the lethal grace of a predator from another age. "I'm so sorry," Willa stammered, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I got lost and the door was open, and I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to break the seal on a royal will." He moved into the room with that unsettling vampire speed, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Up close, he was even more devastating, his features sharp and aristocratic, his presence overwhelming. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Please, I'm just the archivist. I was hired to catalog books. I don't know anything about vampire politics or laws or—" His eyes fixed on the parchment she held, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, then something darker, more complicated. "You read it?" It wasn't a question. Willa nodded miserably. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have, but it mentioned my name, and I was confused, and—" She thrust the document toward him. "Here, take it. Pretend I was never here. I'll forget everything I saw." He didn't take the will. Instead, he stared at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You're Willa Bennett." "Yes. How did you know?" "Because I've been searching for you for 3 months." He moved past her to the window, his back rigid with tension. "Since the night Constantine died," Willa's mind reeled. "But I don't understand. I never met King Constantine. I don't know why he would leave me anything, let alone everything. This has to be a mistake. My brother made many mistakes in his long life, but his will was not one of them." The vampire turned back to face her, and Willa saw the family resemblance now, the same aristocratic bones, the same regal bearing. "I am Aleksander Drakonir, and unfortunately for both of us, that document you're holding is entirely legitimate." The room seemed to tilt. Willa grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Your brother. The vampire king was your brother." "My elder brother by 2 centuries. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "He ruled the Eastern Territories for 500 years. When he was killed 3 months ago, the entire vampire world expected me to inherit his throne and holdings. Instead, we discovered that he secretly bequeathed everything to a human woman none of us had ever heard of." "Killed?" Willa's voice came out as a whisper. "I thought he died of natural causes." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Vampires don't die of natural causes, Miss Bennett. Constantine was assassinated, though we've yet to determine by whom. And now you, the mysterious beneficiary of his will, appear at his estate 3 months later, breaking seals and reading confidential documents. He moved closer, his eyes narrowing. Some might find that timing suspicious. Fear lanced through her. You think I had something to do with his death? That's insane. I didn't even know vampires were real until 2 years ago when the Great Revelation happened. I'm nobody. I catalog books for a living. Then explain to me why the most powerful vampire in the Eastern Territories left his kingdom to you. Alexander was close enough now that she could feel the cold radiating from his body, could see the way his pupils dilated as he studied her. Because until I have answers, you're not leaving this estate. Willa's temper flared despite her fear. You can't just hold me prisoner. I have rights. Human-vampire relations are governed by international law now. International law. He repeated the words with dark amusement. How very modern of you. But we're not talking about a parking ticket, Miss Bennett. We're talking about the succession of a vampire throne, about territory worth billions, about ancient power that could reshape the balance of our world. Do you really think human law applies here? It has to. Otherwise, what's the point of anything? Willa met his eyes, refusing to look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. Your brother obviously wanted me to have these things. Maybe you should honor his wishes instead of threatening me. Something sparked in Alexander's expression, surprise or perhaps respect. You're either very brave or very foolish. I prefer brave, but I'll settle for employed. She set the will back on the desk with deliberate care. Look, I don't want a vampire kingdom. I don't want money or power or any of this. There's obviously been some kind of mix-up. Let me go home, hire a lawyer, and we'll sort this out through proper channels. You truly don't know. Alexander studied her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. You genuinely have no idea why Constantine chose you. None whatsoever. I swear on anything you want me to swear on. Willa's frustration mounted. I've never had any contact with vampire nobility. I've never even been to a vampire district. The closest I've come to your world is cataloging donated books. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the desk and retrieved a leather journal from one of the drawers. He flipped through pages covered in the same elegant handwriting that had penned the will, then turned it so Willa could see. The page showed a sketch of a woman. The likeness was remarkable dark hair, delicate features, eyes that seemed both gentle and determined. Below the sketch, a single name. Elena. My brother's soul bond, Alexander said quietly. She died 200 years ago, killed by vampire hunters who didn't believe that humans and vampires could truly love each other. Constantine never recovered. He withdrew from society, ruled with cold efficiency but no warmth, until apparently he found you. Willa stared at the sketch, her throat tight. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman in the drawing could have been her grandmother or even her mother in another lifetime. I look like her. Remarkably so. Which means my brother either found you and saw in you a reincarnation of his lost love, or, Alexander's expression hardened, or someone staged this entire situation to destabilize our house. A setup? Willa's mind raced. You think someone made me look like this Elena person, planted me here and convinced your brother to change his will? It's possible. There are factions within vampire society that would love to see House Drakonir fall. Installing an ignorant human as the heir would certainly accomplish that. He closed the journal with a decisive snap. Which is why you're staying here until I determine the truth. And if I refuse, then you'll be refusing the protection of the only vampire powerful enough to keep you alive. Alexander's voice dropped to something almost gentle. You don't understand what you've inherited, Miss Bennett. You're not just wealthy now. You're a target. Every vampire who wants Constantine's throne, every faction that opposed his rule, every opportunist who sees you as a weak point, they'll all come for you. And they won't be gentle about it. The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud. Willa thought of her small apartment, her quiet life among books and paper. She thought of her mother, who lived 3 states away and called every Sunday. She thought of the careful, ordinary existence she'd built for herself and how it had just shattered like that wax seal on the floor. How long? She asked finally. Until I uncover the truth about your connection to Constantine. Until I know whether you're a pawn, a plant, or somehow the genuine article. Alexander moved to the door, then paused. There are worse prisons than a royal estate, Miss Bennett. You'll have every comfort, every luxury, and you'll have my protection, which in our world is worth more than gold. I don't want to be a prisoner at all, Willa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fear and practicality warred within her. If what he said was true, going home would be suicide. Then consider yourself a guest under house arrest. A ghost of dark humor touched his features. Isadora will show you to your rooms. Don't try to leave the grounds. The wards won't kill you, but they will be extremely unpleasant. He left before she could respond, moving with that preternatural grace that reminded her how very inhuman he was. Willa stood alone in the dead king's study, surrounded by the remnants of a life she didn't understand, heir to a legacy that made no sense. The portrait of Elena seemed to watch her with sad, knowing eyes. The rooms Isadora led her to were more luxurious than anything Willa had ever experienced. The bedroom alone was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in deep burgundies and golds, with furniture that looked centuries old but impeccably maintained. French doors opened onto a balcony overlooking gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers. A vampire creation, Isadora explained, designed to bloom in darkness. Lord Alexander has requested you join him for dinner at sunset, the housekeeper said, her tone formal but not unkind. I've taken the liberty of providing appropriate attire. She gestured to the wardrobe, where Willa found an array of dresses that looked both modern and timeless. Rich fabrics, elegant cuts, nothing ostentatious but everything exquisite. Her size, she noted with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Someone had prepared for her arrival. Thank you, Willa said, then hesitated. Isadora, did you know King Constantine well? The vampire woman's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I served House Drakonir for 300 years. King Constantine was a fair master, if a distant one. After Lady Elena's death, he was never quite the same. Did he ever mention me, or anyone who looked like me? Not to my knowledge. Isadora moved toward the door, then paused. But in the final weeks of his life, His Majesty seemed lighter somehow, as if a great burden had been lifted. He smiled more. He spent hours in the human districts, walking among your kind. Whatever he found, it brought him peace. After she left, Willa stood on the balcony, watching the strange garden below. The city skyline glittered in the distant Nighthaven, the first integrated metropolis where humans and vampires officially coexisted. The great revelation 2 years ago had changed everything, forcing both species to acknowledge each other's existence and negotiate a new world order. But clearly, some things hadn't changed. Power still corrupted, thrones still needed heirs, and love, apparently, could transcend even death. Willa thought about the sketch of Elena, about the impossible coincidence of her resemblance. Could she be a reincarnation? She'd never believed in such things, but then again, she'd never believed in vampires either until they'd revealed themselves to the world. Or was Alexander right? Was she a pawn in someone's game, carefully selected and positioned to destabilize vampire nobility? The thought made her shiver despite the warm night air. She'd always been careful, cautious. She chose a quiet profession, kept her head down, avoided drama. How had she ended up at the center of a supernatural succession crisis? A knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Yes? A young vampire entered, male with the same white hair and pale skin, but a gentler demeanor. Miss Bennett, I'm Lucian, Lord Alexander's aide. He's asked me to brief you on the current situation before dinner. Willa gestured for him to enter, grateful for any information. Please, tell me everything. Lucian settled into one of the chairs with careful formality. The Eastern Territories have been without a proper ruler for 3 months. Lord Alexander has been serving as regent, but the council grows restless. There are 3 major factions vying for control. House Corvinus, led by Lady Morrigan, who believes vampire rule should be exclusive and traditional. House Valerian, led by Lord Sorin, who advocates for increased integration with humanity. And the Purists, a radical group that wants to overthrow the entire nobility system. And I've just inherited the crown they're all fighting for, Willa said faintly. In essence, yes. According to vampire law, King Constantine's will supersedes all other claims. You are the legitimate heir. Lucian's expression grew troubled, but legitimacy doesn't guarantee safety. There have already been 3 attempts to invalidate the will through legal challenges, and less legal methods are being discussed as well. Assassination. I'm afraid so, which is why Lord Alexander has activated the estate's full defensive protocols. You're probably safer here than anywhere else in the world, but you cannot leave the grounds until the situation stabilizes. Willa rubbed her temples, fighting off an impending headache. What does Alexander want? Does he want the throne? Lucian was quiet for a moment. Lord Alexander never wanted to rule. He spent centuries as his brother's general, his enforcer, his shadow. He's a warrior, not a politician. But he loved his brother deeply, and he will honor Constantine's wishes, even if he doesn't understand them. He thinks I'm a fake. He thinks you're a mystery. And Lord Alexander doesn't like mysteries. Lucian stood, smoothing his jacket. For what it's worth, Miss Bennett, I believe my lord will protect you regardless of the truth. He takes his duties very seriously. After he left, Willa moved to the wardrobe and selected a dress deep emerald silk that draped elegantly without being too formal. If she was going to be trapped in a vampire estate, she might as well look the part. Dinner was served in a smaller dining room that still managed to feel grand, with vaulted ceilings and walls lined with ancient tapestries. Alexander was already seated when Willa entered, looking devastating in all black, his white hair pulled back to reveal the sharp lines of his face. He rose as she approached, his manners impeccable despite his obvious tension. "Miss Bennett, I trust your accommodations are satisfactory?" "They're beautiful, thank you." Willa took the seat across from him, acutely aware of his gaze tracking her every movement. "Though I'd prefer to call them accommodations rather than a cell." "Fair enough," he gestured, and silent staff members appeared with covered dishes. "I thought we might dine together and discuss the situation more civilly than our first encounter allowed." The food was exquisite, but Willa barely tasted it. Her attention remained fixed on the vampire across from her, this dangerous, beautiful creature who held her fate in his hands. "Tell me about yourself," Alexander said after a few moments of tense silence. "Your life before all of this." "There's not much to tell. I grew up in a small town, went to university for library science, moved to Nighthaven for work. I like books, quiet evenings, the occasional terrible reality TV show." Willa set down her fork. "I'm boring, Lord Alexander. Profoundly, deeply boring. Which is why all of this makes no sense." "Alexander," he corrected. "If you're to be queen, we dispense with the formalities." "I'm not going to be queen. Once we sort out this misunderstanding, I'm going back to my library." She met his eyes, willing him to understand. "I don't want this life." "Want rarely factors into destiny, Miss Bennett?" "Willa, if we're dispensing with formalities." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Willa, then." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You truly believe you can return to your previous life after this?" "Why not? Sign some papers, renounce my claim, let whoever actually deserves this throne take it." She spread her hands. "Problem solved." "Except it's not that simple. If you renounce your claim, it creates a succession crisis. The 3 factions I mentioned will go to war. Thousands will die, human and vampire both. The fragile peace we've built since the Revelation will shatter." Alexander's expression grew grim. "And you'll still be a target, because someone will always wonder if you might change your mind." Willa's appetite vanished entirely. "So I'm trapped, no matter what I choose." "I'm afraid so, at least until we understand why Constantine chose you." He rose and moved to a sideboard, returning with a leather portfolio. "I've been investigating. These are all the records I could find of Elena Moreau, my brother's soul bond." He spread photographs and documents across the table. Willa leaned forward, her breath catching. The resemblance was uncanny, not just in the sketches, but in actual preserved photographs from the early 1800s. The woman could have been her twin. "Elena was human," Alexander said quietly. "A physician's daughter in provincial France. She met Constantine when he was traveling through her village. By all accounts, they fell in love almost instantly, the kind of bond our kind calls soulmating. It's rare, even among vampires, rarer still between species." "What happened to her?" "Vampire hunters, a group called the Silver Covenant, dedicated to eradicating our kind. They discovered Constantine's relationship with Elena and saw it as an abomination. They killed her brutally, meant to send a message. His voice remained steady, but Willa heard the old pain beneath it. Constantine slaughtered every member of the Covenant in retaliation. It took him 50 years, but he found them all. And then he withdrew from the world for a century, broken by grief. Willa touched one of the photographs tracing Elena's face. He must have loved her very much. He did. And when he finally emerged from his mourning, he was changed. Harder, colder, he ruled efficiently but without passion, without joy. I thought he would remain that way forever. Alexander's eyes fixed on her. Until 3 months ago when something changed, when he found you. But I never met him, I swear it. I believe you, which means he was watching you, studying you, perhaps from a distance. Alexander gathered the documents back into the portfolio. The question is, did he see Elena reborn, or simply someone who looked like her? And more importantly, why did that lead him to make you his heir? Willa's mind raced. Maybe he wanted to give Elena or someone like her the life she never got to have, safety, security, power enough to protect herself. Alexander went very still. That's actually a remarkably insightful theory. I read a lot of tragic romances, occupational hazard. She managed a weak smile. If your brother truly loved Elena, maybe leaving everything to me was his way of making amends, of giving her legacy something eternal. Then you believe in reincarnation? I don't know what I believe anymore. 2 days ago, my biggest concern was a shipment of damaged manuscripts. Now, I'm apparently the heir to a vampire kingdom because I look like a woman who died 2 centuries ago. Willa rubbed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her. This is insane. Welcome to immortal politics. Alexander moved around the table, his expression softening slightly. You're handling this better than most humans would. I'm screaming internally, if that helps. He did smile then, brief but genuine, and it transformed his face from intimidating to breathtaking. Come, there's something I want to show you. He led her through the mansion's corridors, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every stone intimately. They passed through a gallery lined with portraits, generations of House Drakonir, their pale faces and proud bearing marking them as formidable rulers. Finally, they reached a set of double doors carved with intricate symbols. Constantine's private gallery, Alexander said, producing an ornate key. No one has entered since his death. I think it's time you saw what your inheritance truly means. The room beyond took Willa's breath away. It was part museum, part shrine, filled with artifacts and art spanning centuries. But what drew her attention immediately were the paintings covering one entire wall, dozens of them, all of the same woman. Elena. In every stage of her short life, captured with the kind of loving detail that spoke of deep obsession or deeper love. Elena as a child, laughing in a garden, Elena as a young woman, reading by candlelight, Elena in her final days, thin and pale, but still beautiful, still beloved. He couldn't let her go, Willa whispered. No, he carried her with him across 200 years. Alexander moved to stand beside her, his voice rough. I used to think it was unhealthy, this devotion to a ghost, but now I wonder if it was simply love that transcended even death. Willa turned to study him, seeing past the cold warrior exterior to the man beneath. You've never experienced it, this soul bonding. No, I've had lovers, companions, but never that consuming connection Constantine described. He said it was like Elena completed him, made him whole in a way he'd never been before. Alexander's expression grew distant. When she died, he said he felt like half his soul had been ripped away. He spent decades wanting to follow her into death, but vampires are notoriously difficult to kill, so instead, he endured. And then he saw me. And then he saw you. Alexander turned to face her fully, his eyes searching hers. Tell me, Willa Bennett, do you believe in fate? In souls that find each other across lifetimes? I don't know. I want to believe that love can be that powerful, that it can outlast death and time. She looked back at Elena's portraits, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her. But I also know that I'm not her. I'm not Elena Moreau. I'm just myself, and I don't know if that's enough. Perhaps that's exactly what Constantine wanted, not Elena's ghost, but a woman with her face and her own soul. A second chance, not at what was lost, but at what could be. Alexander's voice dropped lower, more intimate. Perhaps he wanted to give her you the choice Elena never had, to be powerful instead of vulnerable, to be queen instead of victim. The idea sent a shiver through her. That's a heavy gift. The heaviest. He moved closer, and Willa found herself acutely aware of his presence, the cold radiating from his skin, the predatory grace in every movement, but you don't have to carry it alone. Whatever the truth of your connection to my brother, you're part of House Drakonir now, which means you're under my protection. Why? The question came out breathless. Why would you protect someone who's stolen your inheritance? Because Constantine wanted this, because you might be exactly what our house needs, a symbol of the integration between our kinds, proof that vampires and humans can trust each other. His eyes held hers, intense and unreadable. And because despite my suspicions, despite my doubts, I find myself believing you. You're either the most talented actress I've ever encountered, or you're exactly what you appear to be, an innocent woman caught up in something far beyond her understanding. I vote for the second one. As do I. He stepped back, breaking the tension that had built between them. Come. It's late and you need rest. Tomorrow, we begin your education in vampire politics and law. If you're to survive this, you need to understand the world you've inherited. Over the following days, Willa's life became a strange blend of captivity and luxury. Alexander proved to be a demanding but patient teacher, educating her in the intricate hierarchies of vampire society, the ancient laws that governed their kind, the delicate balance between the various houses and factions. She learned that vampire nobility operated on a feudal system updated for the modern age, with territories that overlapped human cities but existed in a parallel dimension of power and influence. She learned about blood courts and ancient councils, about the role of the vampire king as both ruler and symbol, mediator and enforcer. Most importantly, she learned about the threats arrayed against her. Lady Morrigan of House Corvinus believes humans are inferior beings, suitable for feeding but not for ruling, Alexander explained one afternoon as they walked through the estate's gardens. She views your inheritance as an abomination and has filed multiple legal challenges. So far, the council has upheld Constantine's will, but her influence grows daily. And Lord Sorin? More complicated. House Valerian supports integration, so theoretically they should support you. But Sorin wants the throne for himself, believing a vampire ruler would be more effective at bridging our worlds. Alexander plucked a glowing flower from a nearby bush, twirling it absently. He's dangerous because he's reasonable. His arguments make sense, and many on the council agree with him. Maybe they're right. Maybe a vampire would be better suited for this. Willa watched as luminescent petals drifted from the flower in his hands. I still don't understand why Constantine thought a human librarian could rule a vampire kingdom. Perhaps because you don't want to. Alexander met her eyes, his expression thoughtful. Every vampire who seeks the throne does so from ambition, from hunger for power. But you? You have no agenda, no political debts, no faction loyalty. You're untouched by our endless scheming. I'm also completely unqualified. Constantine was only 30 years old when he became king. He learned on the throne, made mistakes, grew into his role. He offered her the flower, a gesture that felt strangely intimate. You could do the same with the right support. Willa took the bloom, her fingers brushing his. The cold of his skin no longer startled her. Instead, she found herself hyper-aware of the contact, of the way his eyes darkened slightly when they touched. You'd support me, even though the throne should be yours? I never wanted to rule, but I want to honor my brother's memory, and I want to protect you. His voice dropped lower. Both are becoming equally important to me. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Over the past week, something had shifted in their dynamic. The initial antagonism had melted into wary respect, then deepened into something more complex. Willa found herself watching for Alexander throughout the day, her pulse quickening when he entered a room. His protectiveness, which had initially felt stifling, now felt reassuring. Safe. Dangerous, that feeling. Dangerous to rely on a vampire warrior who looked at her sometimes like she was a puzzle to solve, and sometimes like she was something infinitely more precious. Alexander, she started, but he held up a hand, his expression sharpening. Someone's breached the wards. Before she could react, he pulled her behind him, his entire demeanor transforming from contemplative to lethal. Lucian appeared from nowhere, moving with preternatural speed to flank them. 3 intruders, my lord. They used blood magic to create a temporary opening. Blood magic? Alexander's voice turned deadly cold. The purists, then. They're the only ones reckless enough to use forbidden arts. He turned to Willa, his hands gripping her shoulders. Listen to me carefully. Lucian will take you to the safe room. Lock yourself in and don't come out until I come for you personally. What are you going to do? My job, protecting what's mine. He released her and vanished into the gathering darkness with speed that left her dizzy. Lucian urged her toward the mansion, his hand on her elbow. Quickly, Miss Bennett, the purists don't take prisoners. The safe room was hidden behind a bookshelf in the library, appropriately enough, Willa thought, with slightly hysterical humor. Lucian ushered her inside, showed her how to lock the reinforced door, and promised to return as soon as the threat was neutralized. Then she was alone in a windowless chamber, listening to muffled sounds of combat from somewhere above. The room was stocked with supplies, water, even a small cot. Clearly, House Drakonir took security seriously. Time crawled. Willa tried to distract herself by examining the books lining the safe room's shelves. First editions, rare manuscripts, treasures that would have fascinated her a week ago. Now she could barely focus on them, her mind conjuring terrible images of Alexander fighting unknown enemies. When had he become so important to her? When had the cold vampire prince transformed into someone she cared about, worried for, wanted to see safe? The answer, she realized, was gradual and inevitable. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of his surprising gentleness had chipped away at her fear, until all that remained was attraction and something deeper, more frightening. She was falling for him, for an immortal vampire warrior who saw her as duty and mystery and possibly nothing more. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless in the sealed chamber. When the lock finally clicked, Willa's heart leaped into her throat. She grabbed the nearest heavy object, a marble bookend shaped like a dragon, and raised it defensively. "Willa, it's me," Alexander's voice. She sagged with relief as he entered, and then gasped. His shirt was torn and bloodied, though she couldn't tell if the blood was his or someone else's. A cut marred his perfect alabaster cheek, already healing as she watched. "You're hurt." "I'm fine. The intruders are dead." He moved toward her with deliberate slowness, as if afraid she might bolt. "I'm sorry you had to experience that. I should have anticipated the purists would act. I'm not made of glass. I don't need you to apologize for things beyond your control." Willa set down the bookend and approached him, drawn by concern that overrode her common sense. "But you are hurt. That cut will heal completely in minutes. Vampire regeneration." But he didn't pull away when she reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle near the fading wound. "Willa, I was terrified," she admitted. "Not for myself, but for you. I kept thinking about you fighting, getting hurt, maybe dying, and I realized that She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "That you what?" His voice was rough, his eyes fixed on her face with burning intensity. "That I care about you. More than I should, probably. More than is wise." She dropped her hand, suddenly self-conscious. "You're immortal and powerful and completely out of my league. But somewhere between accusing me of murder and teaching me about vampire politics, you became important to me." Alexander went very still. Then, with a carefulness that spoke of iron control, he cupped her face in both hands. His skin was cool against hers, his touch gentle despite the violence he'd just enacted. "Willa Bennett, you're the most infuriating, surprising woman I've encountered in 500 years. His thumbs traced her cheekbones with reverent precision. "You should terrify me. You should be a problem to solve and nothing more. Instead, I find myself thinking about you constantly, wanting to make you smile, wanting to keep you safe not out of duty, but because the thought of anything harming you makes me want to burn the world." That's very dramatic. I'm a 500-year-old vampire. Drama is our specialty. But his expression softened, became almost vulnerable. I'm falling for you. Against my better judgment, against all wisdom, I'm falling for the human woman my brother left me to protect. Willa's heart felt too large for her chest. Is that allowed? In vampire culture, I mean. Can a lord court the queen he's supposed to be guarding? I have no idea. We're writing new rules as we go. He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is madness, and I'll step back. I'll protect you from everyone, including myself. What if I don't want you to stop? Her hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the stillness beneath his ribs where a human heart would beat. What if I want to see where this madness leads? His kiss was everything she'd imagined and nothing she could have prepared for. Cold lips that warmed against hers, gentle pressure that spoke of a passion barely restrained. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for centuries. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, or at least, Willa was breathing hard, while Alexander simply looked stunned. She managed a shaky laugh. So that just happened? Yes. He pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms like he could shield her from the entire world. And it complicates everything. Good. I was getting bored with simple. His laugh was surprised and genuine, vibrating through his chest into hers. You're extraordinary. You know that? I'm a librarian who accidentally inherited a vampire kingdom and somehow started kissing the scariest vampire in the Eastern Territories. I'm either extraordinary or completely insane. Both, perhaps. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender and possessive. But you're mine now, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. The following weeks transformed Willa's captivity into something closer to a fairy tale, albeit one with very sharp teeth. Alexander remained her teacher and protector, but now he was also her lover, her constant companion, the person she reached for when she woke and the last face she saw before sleeping. He taught her to navigate vampire politics with the same careful attention he'd once used to interrogate her. He introduced her to allies within the nobility vampires who believed in Constantine's vision of integration, who saw her inheritance as opportunity rather than threat. He stood beside her at council meetings, his presence a silent but powerful endorsement. And in private, he showed her tenderness she'd never expected from someone so dangerous. He brought her flowers from the night garden, learned her favorite books so he could discuss them with her, held her through nightmares about hunters and blood and violence. I've been thinking about the soul bond, Willa said one night as they lay together in her chambers, her head on his chest. About Constantine and Elena. What about it? His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder, a gesture of contentment. Do you think it's possible to have more than one soul bond in a lifetime, or across lifetimes? She tilted her head to look up at him. If Elena and Constantine were truly bonded, and if I am Elena reincarnated somehow, could that bond still exist? Could it find new expression? Alexander considered this, his expression thoughtful. You're asking if what we feel is an echo of their connection, or something entirely our own. I guess I am. Does it matter? Yes and no. He shifted so they were face to face, his silver eyes serious. If you're Elena reborn, then loving you would mean loving my brother's soulmate. It would feel like a betrayal even though he's gone. But if you're simply Willa, someone who happens to share Elena's face but possesses her own soul, then what we have is untainted by the past. And which do you believe? I believe you're Willa, he said without hesitation. You have Elena's features, perhaps even fragments of her soul, if such things can fragment and reform. But you're fundamentally yourself, sharp and brave and kind in ways that are entirely unique. When I kiss you, I'm not kissing a ghost. I'm kissing the woman who threatened me with a marble dragon while I was covered in blood. She laughed, despite the seriousness of the conversation. That was a low point. That was when I knew I was lost. He kissed her softly. You were terrified but defiant, vulnerable but strong. Everything I've come to love about you. Love? The word hung between them, precious and dangerous. Dio. Love, he confirmed. I know it's too soon by human standards. I know we've only known each other for weeks, and half that time I suspected you of conspiracy. But vampires live so long that we learn to recognize what matters quickly. And you matter, Willa. You matter more than territory or thrones or anything else. Tears pricked her eyes. I love you too. I probably shouldn't, and I definitely didn't plan to, but I do. You're arrogant and overprotective, and you brood like it's an Olympic sport, but you're also the kindest, most honorable person I've ever met. Brooding is an Olympic sport among vampires. I'm the reigning champion. But his voice was thick with emotion. Stay with me, not because of Constantine's will or vampire politics, but because you choose to. Be my partner, my equal, my love. I will, she promised. Whatever comes next, we face it together. What came next was Lady Morrigan. The leader of House Corvinus arrived at the estate 3 days later, demanding an audience with the Pretender Queen. Alexander wanted to refuse her, but Willa overruled him. If she was going to rule, if she was going to embrace this insane inheritance, she needed to face her enemies directly. Lady Morrigan was everything Willa had expected. Imposing, beautiful in a cold way, with white hair styled in an elaborate updo and eyes like chips of ice. She swept into the receiving room like she owned it, her entourage of vampire lords flanking her with military precision. So you're the human who thinks she can rule our kind. Morrigan's voice dripped disdain. How quaint. Willa sat in the chair that had been Constantine's throne, feeling the weight of history and responsibility pressing down on her. Alexander stood at her right hand, silent but menacing, his presence a clear warning. I don't think anything, Lady Morrigan. I simply accept the wishes of your late king. Willa kept her voice steady, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. King Constantine chose me as his heir, unless you're questioning his judgment? A dangerous light entered Morrigan's eyes. Constantine was compromised by sentiment. He saw a human girl with his dead lover's face and lost what remained of his reason. His choice was based on nostalgia, not wisdom. Then you are questioning his judgment. Willa leaned forward. Tell me, Lady Morrigan, how long did you serve under King Constantine? How many years did you benefit from his rule, his protection, his leadership? 400 years, Morrigan admitted grudgingly. 400 years of following a king you now claim was senile and compromised. Willa let that sink in. That doesn't speak well of your own judgment, does it? Either Constantine was a great king whose final wishes should be honored, or he was incompetent and you were foolish to follow him for centuries. Which is it? Morrigan's expression turned murderous. You dare. I dare because I have to. Willa stood, drawing herself to her full height, even though she was still shorter than every vampire in the room. I never asked for this inheritance, Lady Morrigan. I was perfectly happy cataloging books and living my quiet human life. But Constantine chose me for reasons I'm still discovering, and I won't dishonor his memory by running away. Pretty words from a girl playing dress-up? Morrigan moved closer, her movements predatory. But words won't keep you safe when the council moves against you. Words won't stop the knife in the dark or the poison in your cup. Alexander shifted, his hand moving to the sword at his hip, but Willa touched his arm gently. Wait. Are you threatening me, Lady Morrigan? She asked calmly. I'm stating facts. You're human, fragile, temporary. Even if you take the throne, you'll die in a few decades while we continue for centuries. You cannot provide the stability we need. Then turn me. The words came out before Willa fully thought them through, but once spoken, she realized they were right. If my mortality is the issue, make me immortal. King Constantine left protocols for such a transformation in his papers. I'll become vampire and rule for centuries if that's what it takes to honor his wishes. The room went utterly silent. Even Alexander looked shocked. You would undergo the transformation? Morrigan sounded skeptical. You understand what you'd lose? Your humanity, your sunlight, your very soul according to some beliefs? I understand I'd gain the strength to protect the people I love and the kingdom I've inherited. Willa met Morrigan's gaze without flinching. I'd gain time enough to prove myself as a ruler, to bridge the gap between our kinds, to fulfill whatever vision Constantine had when he chose me. Isn't that worth the price? Morrigan studied her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed a cold, cutting sound. Perhaps Constantine was wiser than I thought. You have courage, girl. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. She turned to her entourage. We're leaving. But mark my words, Willa Bennett. If you take the throne, I'll be watching, and the moment you prove unworthy, I'll remove you myself." After they left, Willa's knees gave out. She collapsed back into the chair, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. Alexander was at her side instantly, his hands steadying her. "That was the bravest, most reckless thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice somewhere between awe and anger. "You can't seriously be considering transformation." "Why not?" She looked up at him, seeing the turmoil in his eyes. "You hurt her. My mortality is the biggest argument against my rule. If I become vampire, I eliminate that argument." Transformation isn't simple, Willa. It's agonizing. It takes weeks and there's no guarantee of survival. Even if you do survive, you'll be changed fundamentally. You'll crave blood, shun sunlight, live forever, watching everyone you knew grow old and die. His hands tightened on her shoulders. "I won't let you sacrifice your humanity for a throne you never wanted." "It's not just about the throne anymore." She covered his hands with hers. "It's about us, about building the future Constantine envisioned, about proving that humans and vampires can truly unite." She paused, gathering her courage. "And it's about spending more than a few decades with you. I want forever, Alexander. I want to stand beside you not as a fragile human you have to constantly protect, but as your equal." His expression cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "You would do this? Give up sunlight, warmth, mortality? For me? For us? For the kingdom? For the chance to make a real difference?" She stood and framed his face with her hands. "I love you. I want to spend centuries with you, not just years. And if becoming vampire is what it takes, then I'll do it gladly. It's not a decision to make lightly. I know, which is why I'm asking you to guide me through it. Help me understand what I'm choosing, what I'll lose and gain. And then, if I still want this, perform the transformation yourself." She held his gaze. "I trust you, Alexander. I trust you with my life, my death, and my immortality." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. "I'll give you a month. Learn about what transformation truly means. Speak to other vampires about their experiences. Make absolutely certain this is what you want. And if after all that you still choose this path, I'll be honored to be your sire." The month that followed was intense, educational, and surprisingly joyful. Willa spoke to dozens of vampires about their transformations, learning about the pain and wonder of the process. She studied the changes in detail, the enhanced senses, the hunger for blood, the sensitivity to sunlight, the strange timelessness of immortal existence. She also spent her days preparing to rule, working with Alexander and the council to establish policies that would benefit both humans and vampires. She proposed initiatives for integrated schools, mixed districts where both species could live openly, legal protections for interspecies relationships. To her surprise, many vampires embraced these ideas. Not all House Corvinus remained hostile, and the purists attempted 2 more attacks, but enough to give her hope. Maybe Constantine had been right. Maybe she could bridge these 2 worlds. And through it all, Alexander remained her anchor. He showed her the full scope of vampire society, introduced her to ancient allies and potential enemies, taught her combat basics because even immortal queens should know how to defend themselves. He loved her fiercely, protectively, with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel invincible. On the night before her transformation, they stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. Nighthaven glittered below them, humans and vampires sharing streets and lives, building something new together. "Last chance to change your mind," Alexander said softly. "No one would blame you for choosing to stay human." "I'm not changing my mind." Willa leaned into his embrace, feeling safe and certain. "Tomorrow I become vampire. In a month, when the transformation is complete, I take the throne officially, and we begin building the future together." "Together," he echoed. "I like the sound of that." She turned in his arms to face him. "Tell me about the transformation. What exactly will happen?" "It's a 3-stage process. First, I'll drain you nearly to death enough to bring you to the very edge. Then you'll drink my blood, ancient blood from one of the old lines. The vampire essence will begin rewriting your human biology, changing you cell by cell." His expression grew somber. For 3 weeks, you'll be caught between life and death, human and vampire. It will be excruciating. Your body will fight the change even as it accepts it. Many don't survive this phase. But you'll be with me. Every moment, I won't leave your side." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And when you wake fully transformed, you'll be stronger than any new vampire in history. You'll carry both my bloodline and Constantine's legacy. You'll be magnificent." "I'll be yours," she corrected softly. "That's what matters most." The transformation began at midnight in a chamber deep beneath the estate, protected by every ward and spell House Drakonir could muster. Alexander had prepared everything meticulously, soft bedding, a quiet space, contingency plans for every possible complication. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the gravity of what they were about to do. Willa nodded, lying back on the prepared bed. "I'm ready. I love you, Alexander." "I love you too. So very much." He leaned over her, his fangs extending. "It will hurt. I'm sorry for that." "I know, it's okay. I trust you." The first bite was shocking in its intimacy and pain. His fangs pierced her throat with surgical precision, and she felt her blood flowing out, her life force draining away. Alexander held her gently even as he fed, one hand cradling her head, the other over her heart. As weakness overtook her, Willa's vision blurred. She saw Alexander's face above her, saw the mix of love and anguish in his eyes. Then darkness crept in at the edges, cold and vast. Just before she lost consciousness entirely, Alexander opened his own wrist and pressed it to her lips. "Drink, my love, drink and be reborn." His blood tasted like copper and lightning, like power and eternity. It burned down her throat, ignited something primal in her core. The darkness receded slightly, replaced by fire that consumed her from within. And then the real pain began. The weeks that followed existed in a haze of agony and transformation. Willa's body fought itself, human cells dying and vampire ones struggling to take their place. She burned with fever that should have killed her, then shuddered with cold that felt like death itself. Her bones ached as they grew denser, her muscles screamed as they became stronger, her senses exploded with input she couldn't yet process. Through it all, Alexander remained constant. He held her through the worst of it, cooled her burning skin with ice and magic, forced blood down her throat when she was too weak to drink on her own. He whispered encouragement and love and promises of the future, waiting for them. On the 18th day, Willa's human heart stopped beating. For one terrible moment, Alexander thought he'd lost her. She lay completely still, no pulse, no breath, her skin already pale as death. He gathered her lifeless body in his arms, feeling something inside himself crack. He'd performed dozens of transformations over the centuries, but none had mattered like this. None had been the woman he loved. "Don't leave me," he whispered against her hair. "Please, Willa, come back. I need you. The kingdom needs you. Fight for one more moment." Her eyes snapped open, no longer the warm brown they'd been, but now silver-shot crimson vampire eyes, marking her transformation complete. She drew in a breath not because she needed it, but because the habit remained. Then she smiled, and Alexander felt relief crash over him like a wave. "Did I scare you?" Her voice was different too, carrying harmonics that hadn't existed before. "Terrified me." He crushed her to his chest, feeling the absence of a heartbeat where one had been for 23 years. "Never do that again." "Pretty sure I can only become a vampire once." She pulled back to look at him, her enhanced vision taking in details she'd never noticed before. "Alexander, you're even more beautiful like this. I can see colors I didn't know existed. Your eyes have silver threads through them, and your skin isn't just white, it's like starlight. That's the enhanced perception. Everything will be more vivid now, more intense." He helped her sit up carefully. "How do you feel?" "Strong. So incredibly strong." She looked at her hands, flexing fingers that could now crush stone. "And hungry. Is that normal?" "Very normal. Your body is craving its first true feeding to complete the transformation." He produced a crystal glass filled with human blood, donated voluntarily from their estate staff. "Start with this. Later I'll teach you to feed directly, but for now, this is safer." Willa drank, and the hunger that had been gnawing at her instantly settled. The blood tasted better than anything she'd ever consumed as a human, rich and complex and utterly satisfying. "That's amazing," she said when the glass was empty. "Is all blood like that?" "You'll develop preferences. Some vampires prefer certain blood types, others prefer specific emotions in their donors. It's very personal." He watched her with obvious pride. "But first you need to learn control. New vampires are incredibly strong but often clumsy with that strength. Let's start with basic exercises." He spent the next hours teaching her to moderate her new power, to move without destroying everything she touched, to control the speed and strength that now came naturally. Willa was a quick study, and within a day, she could navigate the estate without breaking doorknobs or accidentally crushing furniture. On the third day after her transformation, Alexander took her to a specially prepared chamber deep underground. "This is the hardest lesson, but the most important. You need to learn to feed directly from a living source." A young woman waited there, human, calm despite the circumstances. She smiled at Willa. "I'm Kara. I'm a voluntary donor for House Drakonir. Don't worry, I've done this hundreds of times." "I don't want to hurt you," Willa said, her new vampiric nature warring with her human morals. "You won't if you listen to your instincts and my guidance," Alexander assured her. "The key is to take enough to satisfy your hunger, but not so much that you endanger your donor. With practice, you'll find that perfect balance." It took several attempts and Alexander's steady coaching, but eventually Willa managed a clean feeding that left Kara dizzy but unharmed, and herself satisfied without feeling like a monster. The intimacy of it surprised her, the connection between donor and vampire, the trust required on both sides. "You did beautifully," Alexander said afterward, pride evident in his voice. "Most new vampires take weeks to achieve that level of control. I had a good teacher." She turned to him, taking in his presence with her newly heightened senses. The bond between them felt stronger now, as if becoming vampire had deepened their connection. "Can we go outside? I want to see the night garden with these new eyes." They walked through the grounds hand in hand, Willa marveling at the richness of the darkness. As a human, night had been dim and limited. As a vampire, darkness was full of color and life, every shadow detailed, every sound crisp and clear. "I can see why vampires love the night," she said, spinning in a circle to take it all in. "It's not loss of light, it's a different kind of illumination." "Exactly. Humans think we hide in darkness, but really, we revel in it." Alexander pulled her close, his expression tender. "You're adapting remarkably well. Most new vampires struggle with the changes for months. You're embracing them in days. Because I knew what I was choosing, and because I have you." She kissed him, feeling the cool press of his lips against hers, the way their vampire natures recognized and complemented each other. "So when do I get to test out the throne properly?" "Eager to rule. Eager to start building the future Constantine envisioned, eager to prove Lady Morrigan and all the doubters wrong." She grinned, fangs flashing. "And maybe a little eager to wield some of that royal authority everyone keeps telling me I have." "Then we begin preparations immediately. The coronation will be in 1 week, giving you time to fully adjust to your transformation. Every noble house will attend, along with human dignitaries from around the world." His expression grew serious. "It will be dangerous. There are still factions that oppose you, and a public ceremony provides opportunities for assassination. Let them try. I'm not fragile anymore." She flexed her hands, feeling the power coursing through her. "And I have the most dangerous vampire in the Eastern Territories at my side." Flattery will get you everywhere, but his eyes gleamed with affection and heat. "Come, let's return inside. I want to show you something." He led her to a section of the estate she'd never entered before, through corridors that grew progressively older until they reached a massive door carved with ancient symbols. Beyond lay a vault, and within the vault, treasures that took Willa's breath away. Crowns and regalia from centuries of vampire rule, jewels that glowed with residual magic, weapons forged by masters long dead. And at the center of it all, displayed on a pedestal of black marble, a single crown that made all the others pale in comparison. "The crown of House Drakonir," Alexander said softly, "worn by every ruler of our line for 1,000 years. Constantine wore it, my father wore it, and in 1 week you'll wear it." The crown was platinum and obsidian, set with rubies that seemed to hold captured fire. It was beautiful and terrible, a symbol of power and responsibility that suddenly felt overwhelming. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," Willa admitted quietly. "No one ever is. But you have something most rulers lack: genuine desire to help your people, rather than merely rule them." Alexander moved to stand beside her, his presence reassuring. "You'll be a great queen, Willa. I believe that with everything I am. Will you stand with me? Not just as protector or advisor, but as partner, as co-ruler?" She turned to face him fully. "I know vampire tradition says there's one monarch, but we're already breaking tradition in a dozen ways. Why not one more?" His expression softened. "Are you asking me to marry you, Willa Bennett?" "I suppose I am, very unromantically, in a treasure vault surrounded by ancient weapons." She laughed nervously. "But yes, marry me, Aleksander Drakonir. Rule beside me. Build this future with me as equal partners in everything." Yes. He didn't hesitate, didn't equivocate. Yes to marriage, to partnership, to forever at your side. "I love you, Willa. I would be honored to be your husband and co-ruler." Their kiss in that ancient vault sealed more than their personal bond. It sealed a new era for House Drakonir, one built on love and equality rather than mere power. The coronation took place in the Grand Hall of Nighthaven, a massive structure built to accommodate both vampire and human dignitaries. Every noble house sent representatives, though Willa noted that Lady Morrigan sat in the back rows with an expression of resigned disapproval rather than active hostility. Lord Sorin of House Valyrian sat closer, his expression thoughtful and assessing. The purists, thankfully, had been barred from the ceremony after their repeated assassination attempts. Willa wore a gown of deep burgundy and black, designed to honor both her human origins and her vampire present. Her white hair, which had changed color during transformation, was styled elegantly, and the crown of House Drakonir rested on a cushion before her, waiting. The ceremony was conducted by Elder Matthias, one of the oldest vampires in existence, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "We gather to witness the coronation of Willa Bennett, chosen heir of Constantine Drakonir, who will rule as Queen of the Eastern Territories. Do any present challenge her right?" Silence. Even Morrigan remained seated, having apparently decided that a vampire Willa was preferable to a human one. "Then, by the ancient laws of our kind, by right of inheritance and blood, I crown you queen." Matthias lifted the crown and placed it on Willa's head. "May your rule be long and just." Power surged through the crown into Willa, ancient magic recognizing and accepting her as rightful ruler. She felt the weight of responsibility settle over her, but also a strange confidence. She could do this. She would do this. "I accept this crown and the duties it represents," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "I vow to rule with wisdom and compassion, to protect both vampire and human, to build bridges rather than walls. And I do so not alone, but with my partner and husband-to-be, Prince Aleksander Drakonir, who will serve as king consort and co-ruler." This caused more of a stir. Alexander stepped forward, his own crown simpler than hers, but no less magnificent, placed on his head by Elder Matthias. He knelt before Willa, a gesture of respect and partnership that brought tears to her eyes. "I vow to serve House Drakonir, to support Queen Willa in all things, to rule with honor and strength." He rose and took her hand, facing the assembled nobles together. "And I vow that anyone who threatens our house, our queen, or our kingdom will face the full might of our combined power." The threat was clear, and the message received. House Drakonir was united, stronger than it had been in centuries. The celebration that followed was magnificent music and dancing, blood wine and mortal delicacies, vampires and humans mingling freely. Willa moved through it all with Alexander at her side, greeting dignitaries, accepting congratulations, navigating the complex social dynamics with grace she hadn't known she possessed. Lord Sorin approached as the night wore on, his expression unreadable. "Your Majesty, an impressive coronation." "Thank you, Lord Sorin. I hope we can work together for the good of all vampires." Willa kept her tone diplomatic but firm. I believe we can. You're not what I expected, neither the naive human I feared nor the pretender Lady Morrigan claimed you to be. He glanced at Alexander. You've chosen your allies well, and your transformation shows commitment I must respect. House Valerian will support your rule, provided you continue to prioritize integration over isolation. That was always my intention, Willa assured him. I want our kinds to thrive together, not merely coexist. After he left, Alexander leaned close to whisper, You're a natural at this. Constantine would be proud. I hope so. I hope I'm honoring his memory properly. She looked around the hall, at the celebration, at the future taking shape before them. Do you think he somehow knew that choosing me would lead to all this? I think my brother was wiser than any of us realized. He saw in you the potential to unite our fractured world. Alexander pressed a kiss to her temple. And he gave me the greatest gift possible, you. As the celebration continued around them, Willa felt a sense of peace settle over her. The past months had been chaotic and terrifying and utterly transformative in every sense. She'd gone from ordinary librarian to vampire queen, from someone who avoided conflict to someone who faced down ancient nobles without flinching. But more importantly, she'd found love, the kind of deep, consuming love that Constantine and Elena had shared, but entirely her own. Alexander wasn't a substitute for a dead king's lost soulmate. He was her partner, her equal, the man she would build eternity with. A year later, Willa stood in the same night garden where she'd first realized she was falling for Alexander, watching the glowing flowers sway in the darkness. So much had changed. The Eastern territories thrived under their joint rule, integration initiatives succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Humans and vampires were learning to trust each other, building communities that benefited both species. Lady Morrigan had become an unlikely ally, grudgingly admitting that Willa's rule brought stability and prosperity. The Purists had been disbanded after their leadership was arrested for conspiracy. House Valerian worked closely with the Crown on education and cultural exchange programs. And through it all, Willa and Alexander ruled together, their love deepening with every passing night. You're thinking very seriously, Alexander said, joining her on the balcony. Should I be worried? Just reflecting on how much has changed. A year ago, I broke into a dead king's study and found a will that turned my life upside down. She leaned into his embrace, feeling utterly content. Best mistake I ever made. I think Constantine would argue it wasn't a mistake at all. I think he orchestrated everything perfectly, finding you, watching you, ensuring you'd be in the right place at the right time to discover the will. Alexander's arms tightened around her. He gave us each other and gave the kingdom a future. That's a legacy worth honoring. We'll honor it. Every day, with every decision, with every bridge we build between our kinds. She turned in his arms, her expression solemn. And we'll do it together, for as long as forever lasts. Forever is a long time for a vampire, he teased gently. Good thing I'm patient. She kissed him, deep and sweet, a promise of all the tomorrows stretching before them. I love you, Alexander. Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for being brave enough to claim an impossible inheritance and wise enough to transform it into something beautiful. He rested his forehead against hers. You're not just my queen, Willa. You're my everything. In the distance, the city of Nighthaven glowed with life, human and vampire, mortal and immortal, all existing in the harmony that had once seemed impossible. Constantine's vision, made real through courage and love and the determination of a woman who'd never expected to become queen. Willa thought about the sealed will that had started everything, about the leap of faith required to embrace destiny. She thought about Elena, whose face she wore but whose story was her own. And she thought about the future, stretching ahead, full of challenges and triumphs and love that would endure across centuries. She was exactly where she was meant to be, ruling alongside the vampire who'd become her entire world. The throne, the crown, the power, none of it mattered as much as the simple truth that she'd found her home, her purpose, and her soulmate all at once. In breaking that seal, she'd unsealed her future. And it was more magnificent than any fantasy she'd ever read about in her quiet library days. As dawn approached, still dangerous, despite her transformation, though no longer fatal, they retreated inside together, ready to face whatever the night would bring next. Because they had forever now, and they would spend every moment of it building the world Constantine had dreamed of. A world where love transcended species and death and time itself. A world where a vampire king's final gift became the foundation for lasting peace. And a world where Willa Bennett, former librarian and current queen of the Eastern Territories, proved that the greatest inheritance wasn't wealth or power, but the courage to embrace an unexpected destiny and transform it into extraordinary love.